The first category of elicitation techniques that we're going to talk about are so-called survey techniques, which encompasses interviews and questionnaires. Most of those techniques have in common that the requirements engineer asks question and the stakeholder answers. So the requirements engineer, meaning you drive the process, but there is a possibility or the risk that the stakeholder concerns are missed, because when the requirement engineer asks questions or directs where the process is leading, you might unconsciously miss concerns of the stakeholder that could be relevant sources for requirements. The survey techniques are used for eliciting explicit knowledge, so conscious requirements. If I ask you, what should your website do, or what do you want from a new car, you can explicitly answer. But they are rather bad for eliciting unconscious requirements, because you cannot tell what you don't know. And it also works on the assumption that all respondents are capable of explicitly expressing their knowledge, which is a bold assumption. And all respondents are committed to invest time and effort, which hopefully is the case for your project when you are the requirement engineer, but it's also not a given thing that happens all the time. So the first technique that we're going to talk about are so-called interviews. They can be employed during the entire development process. The requirement engineer prepares questions beforehand, and they might be the same for multiple stakeholders. Could also be the case that they're completely different for all the stakeholders that you talk to. The questions that arise during the interview can be discussed immediately. Clever questions may uncover some conscious requirements, but that's quite challenging and difficult. Experienced interviewers control the course of the conversation, so keeping the stakeholder that you're interviewing on track. They commit themselves to each stakeholder and inquire about specific aspects. The drawback is it's quite time consuming, because you first have to get your list of stakeholders that you would like to talk to, then prepare either just one set of interview questions for all of them, or in worst case separate sets of questions for each of them, and then conduct the interviews and then post-process the interviews. So that takes a lot of time. You have to see if you can afford that. What does the process timeline for interviews look like? So first, preparation. You do so by analyzing documents like scenarios, previous work documents, and prepare questions accordingly. You should have at least one domain expert helping you to prepare those questions. Then while performing the interviews, you should have, in best case, 2 interviewers. First you, the requirements engineer leading this, and then in best case an analyst who's writing the transcript so that you can focus on the interview. You can interview a single person or multiple persons at once. Something that can help is recording the whole session. Once you're done analyzing what you get in responses, post-processing this, and very important, because a lot of requirements engineers forget that, give feedback to the participants. We talked about keeping good relations with your stakeholders and feeling them heard and making them part of the process. So giving them feedback about the results of the interviews is a really good opportunity to do so. So how do you prepare an interview in detail? First, you have to define the purpose. Why do you want to interview those people? What do you want to get? Then, second, who are those people that you want to interview? Invite the participants, taking the object of the interview into account, communicate with the participants and tell them also what's the purpose, let them know. Select a suitable location for the interview. Probably nowadays it's going to be some kind of an online version, but sometimes it also makes sense to really meet in person. Then prepare your questions. Could be open questions so that the interviewee can elaborate themselves. Could also be closed question. Should the color of the website be blue? Yes, no. Or you can ask them what's the supposed color of the website. Where possible, with a specific context, with at least one domain expert to prepare those questions. And in your own self-interest, you should avoid leading questions. So don't prepare questions where you implicitly already give the answer to the interviewer. You want to know and understand their requirements, not your own. And for the interviewer, you should make sure that you're really familiar with the participants and their terminology. We talked about this problem of having different backgrounds and language skills. Then we go to conducting the interview after preparing the questions. First, introduction. You come into the room, you sit down, maybe some small talk, make sure that there's some coffee, and then you explain them what is the interview good for, what will happen with the answers. Tell them that you will get back to them and give them feedback and tell them like, what did you get out of this? And then get started with the actual content, the questionnaire. Start general, progress to more specific issues. Mixture of open and closed questions. Make sure to active listening. Ensure non-verbal communication. So look at, like, do they look confused, for example, if you ask a question, that's something. Also, don't look bored or don't give them negative emotions when they are trying their best to give you requirements. Also make sure to prevent typical mistakes like deviation from topics. Make sure that you're staying on track. Do not be satisfied with general answers. You need to work with those answers. If they don't help you to elicit requirements, the answer is not satisfying or your question was bad. And also try to avoid an uneasy atmosphere. So make sure that there are no noises, no interruptions, that it's not too cold, not too warm, everything that might cause the interview to be distracted or want to get over with this very quickly. You should take your time to do so. And then finish, comment on the first impression. Like, what do you think about what you did there? Outline further activities. Thank the interviewed person, make them feel valuable and heard. And interviewed person has the final say. Is there something that they would like to add, something that they would like to say to close the session? So really make sure that it's about the interviewed person. It's not about you. The interviewed person is the core of the interview. Then you're done. You did all the interviews. Then it's time to post-process the interviews. That means write a protocol of the interview for each and every interview that you conduct. Document explicitly gained requirements. Do it right after that interview. As little time as possible between interview and protocol. Revise your models and scenarios used for the interview. Did that make sense, or should you change something for the next one? Make a to-do list of the remaining questions. And for further communication with the interviewed person, make sure that you give them the results so they can check and confirm that what you wrote down and what you elicit in terms of requirements from them is actually what they also mean. Identify conflicts between the requirements, that they say at the same time that the website should be blue and green, and try to resolve identified conflicts with the interviewee. And now we're moving on to questionnaires. Questionnaires and surveys by design are similar. They're both question-based. The main difference being that an interview is something live and a questionnaire is something that you prepare and then give to people. Questionnaires are very well suited for a large number of participants. Say if you have to ask 100 participants, then interviews become very time intensive. And usually they're out of your budget for hundreds of people. And it just takes too long to develop the project and the product then. So they're very good for a large number of participants. They're cheap and time efficient, especially in comparison to interviews. You also can do them online, even though that's also true for interviews, especially now after the pandemic. You can use different kind of questions, similar to the interviews. Open questions, closed questions. Closed questions are better suited for less experienced stakeholders. This is true for questionnaires as well as interviews. Obviously, there are also drawbacks. Everything that has advantages also has drawbacks. Only the questionnaires are only good for eliciting requirements known or conjectured, not able to pose additional questions due to feedback. You can not go straight back to the person and ask them. It's the same way you would do it in an interview. If there's something unclear or if you have a follow-up question in the interview, no problem. Questionnaire, more difficult. And You also have no option to give immediate feedback. So forgotten or badly phrased questions are possible and a problem to you.